Hey friends, this is Nick, and I call my channel DZ Performance, and I really appreciate you tuning in. The project that I've got to bring you today, I'm very excited. I put a lot of work into this, and I hope it's something that you guys enjoy. I really enjoyed doing it. If you watch my channel, one of my businesses is I build big block and small block Chevys and sell some motors, and I take you guys along on adventures, drag racing, and dyno testing. I've gotten the opportunity to dyno test with Eric Weingartner down in Oklahoma and also out in Ohio. Me and Mark Jones has done some dyno testing together on some of my motors that I've had oval port heads that I've ported, but this project's something completely different. The inspiration on this project is I see some guys out there on their YouTube channels doing some economical small blocks, and that really got me fired up to do something of my own. And where my inspiration comes from is I buy a lot off of Facebook Marketplace or whatever avenue, small block and big block Chevys, and the guy that I'm usually buying it from, he usually tells me the story a lot of times. Many times he tells me the story. He's going to LS the car, and it's going to be so great and so cheap. And I ask him, how much is it going to cost you to LS that thing? A couple $1,000s. And how much you going to have in the motor? Oh, the motors are cheap, but then after you do all this other stuff to it, a couple $1,000s. Well, these motors are built along the lines of probably what we would have had in our cars in high school in the 80s or 70s, before roller cams and aluminum heads, aluminum Chinese heads. These motors are all stuff that I bought off of Facebook Marketplace. I tried to make it really legit to where if I used anything that I personally had in the shop, I proved that I could have bought it for the same amount, through Facebook Marketplace. I'm doing the floor mat of this video a little different than my previous videos that I normally do. I'm going to show you the 350 Chevy first. I'm going to take you on the road trip out to Ohio. We're dyno testing these at Bob McVeigh's dyno test and machine shop out in Ohio. He's the home shop of Bill Hodgkins out there, Old Man's Garage. You see Bill over there a lot, having Bob building motors and dyno test. But great guys, fun place to go. But let me give you just a brief outline of this first motor before we go out and see the dyno testing. The short block comes out of a 1981 Corvette that I saw on Facebook Marketplace. He had bought a blueprint engine and put this in as a low mile Corvette. I broke the bank and paid a total of $700 for the motor. The top end of it had good 4-barrel heads, that guides were all tight, nice heads, factory aluminum intake and factory aluminum fin valve covers, stuff that I credited when I took it off and I put what I wanted on the top end. The top end is double hump heads, 1964 model double hump heads. The intake is an Elbrock RPM. I bought that for $125 off of Marketplace also. The camshaft's a used camshaft, a Melling RV cam. I'll run over those specs. I'll run over all the specs with you and the price breakdown after we go out to Ohio. I'll show you the videotape of the dyno test. So I'll be right back.
4500?
No, probably 48.
Oh! Not ask that.
Ain't bad.
That still made way more.
Okay, I'm back. I'm back to give you the specs and the results of the dyno test, fill you in a little bit on the history, just some general information on the 350 that you just watched run on the dyno. Like I was telling you, it's a 1981 350. The blue color's terrible with the orange heads. I know it makes me kind of nauseous also, but I have so many motors, I paint them. I've painted this one that color so I can keep it straight what this motor is at a glance. But it's a 1981 350, and this is a economical build. It does not have new rings in it. I only replaced most of the rod bearings, none of the mains, and I did replace the cam bearings. But let's start at the bottom. It's the factory Corvette oil pan. I did replace the oil pump on this one. The oil pump had never been replaced. It had a Chloe's double roller timing chain on it. Someone had changed the timing chain sometime in this motor's life. The rings are the factory rings. I showed you some video. I checked piston to wall clearance, you know, old school. I didn't use any special tools, just showing you. I went through it. I checked ring gap with a feeler gauge. I took the rings off the pistons and just cleaned them. They are the original rings. I lightly honed it just to knock off some varnish and make sure everything was clean. The camshaft that is in the project, like I said, it has a Chloe's double roller chain, has a new oil pump. The camshaft is a Melling RV cam. I think it might be the most popular cam in the world. Everyone I ever knew back in the day had one in their, anything from a C10 to an old Nova. The duration at 50 thousandths on the intake is a 204. On the exhaust, it is a 214 measured at 50 thousandths valve lift. The maximum lift on this cam is a 520. The maximum lift on the exhaust is a, excuse me, I said 520. It's 420. The maximum lift on the exhaust is a 440. The pistons are setting 23 thousandths in the hole. It has 64 cc combustion chamber cylinder heads with a Fel-Pro 39 thousandths head gasket. The compression comes in at a 9.2. And by the way, all three of these motors, the 307 cubic inch, the 350, and the 400, all of them was dyno tested on 89 octane gas. The cylinder heads have zero porting. They have factory springs, umbrella seals. I just went through them and did, you know, lap the valves in aggressively with some coarse compound to make sure everything was clean and sealing. I was really tempted to do some porting, but I wanted to know what bone stock 461 and old double humps would do on this project. The intake is an Edelrock RPM. It was dyno tested with a 1-inch open spacer. The only reason I did a 1-inch open spacer is just what happened to be bolted on the manifold, and I loaded it in the truck that way, and it ended up that way. The crankshaft, we all probably know, but I'll run over it real quick. The length of the stroke is a 3.48 length stroke. The rods are a 5.7. They have pistons on them that have a 12 cc dish. All of it stock, none of it aftermarket, all of it stock. The horsepower that this produced was 317 horsepower, 404 foot-pounds of torque. Running down the money, what I spent on this project, on the 350 project, was the short block. I'm charging $400 because I gave a total of $700 for the motor, but the top end stuff is very sellable products. I'm accrediting myself $300 for the top end that came off of it. The heads, I showed you a clip of where I bought those, a picture. I gave $200 for some double humps. They had several guides replaced and looked like they'd had a valve job one time in their life, had factory springs on them. The springs I reused. The rockers I reused off the 81 Vet motor along with the push rods. The intake was bought off of Facebook Marketplace, and I showed you guys the ad. The RBGS PC, that's rings, bearings, gaskets, silicone, paint, and cleaning supplies. I'll show you that on all of these projects. That's just kind of a miscellaneous column. I got $150 in that, but there's no new rings in this one. That's just a miscellaneous column, and that 150 is just a rounded up approximate. I do have a new oil pump in this motor. Total spent on this is $1,035. I did not charge spark plugs, oil, the carburetor, wires, distributor. You got to have all those things to run any motor down the street in your car, so I really didn't feel like they had a place to be charged on that. I was extremely happy with that little 350. That's the kind of horsepower we were always told those motors made, but you know, I never knew anybody that actually dynoed one. I might have seen some videos, but I actually did it and seen it. Most motors I dyno are 500 to 800 horse street strip motors, so that was fun. That was a fun project. Let's move on to the 400. The 400 is going to be the next on the dyno. It's a bone stock cam. Let's just say the bottom end of this is rings, bearings, and gaskets, of course, and I put ARP rod bolts in the rods because I plan on whaling on this thing harder in the future. But the pistons are stock, everything's stock, low ring groove, just nice little 400. It has been bored 30,000 sometime in its life, but all the parts were stock. The pistons were a stock replacement. The cylinder heads are nice Vortex. I gave $200 for those. I did do a pocket port bowl blend on those. The intake is just a cheap eBay, I suspect, Chinese intake. I don't know. I got it for around $130. The valve covers came with the heads. One expense on this motor is I have 1.6 rockers on it that are Elgin rockers. They're 1.6s. So stock motor, stock cam, Vortex heads cleaned up a little bit, 1.6 rockers, eBay intake. I'll run the footage and show you this one on the dyno. I'm back to review the specs and performance on the 400 small block we just saw run on the dyno. It's a motor that I gave $600 for off of Facebook Marketplace. It was sold to me to have been rebuilt sometime in its life, and it had been. It was bored 30,000s. It had it looked like just a factory rebuild with all, stock bearings, and the crank had not been turned. It is a 511 block, casting number 511. It's a 4-bolt main. I was told it came out of, I did not see the vehicle, but I was told it came out of a 71 station wagon, like a Malibu station wagon. What I did when I got the motor was rings, bearings, gaskets, ARP rod bolts on the short block. It's a factory cam. It's not the cam that came in the motor. One of the lifters looked a little weird to me, and I've got factory cams that I have saved back from other motors I've disassembled, but I put a factory cam back in it with the factory lifters, push rods, and we move on to the cylinder heads. The cylinder heads are Vortec heads. I gave $200 for. They have a minor bowl blend pocket port on them. I put Elgin 1.6 rockers on them, a higher than factory ratio rocker to give it a little more lift. They give you about a little under 30 thousandths more lift on a stock cam. The springs are just the Vortec stock springs. The intake is a eBay intake. I gave approximately $130 for it. All these motors was ran with the same 750 Brawler carburetor. The distributor was a MSD Street Fire wires. The spark plugs, I believe, were the spark plugs that came with the heads. I cleaned them and torched them, and they're used spark plugs. So anyway, the performance that the 400 achieved was 376 horsepower and 478 foot-pounds of torque. It did have a pull that it made 480 foot-pounds of torque, but I'm showing you the highest horsepower that it achieved. The way the money broke down on the 406 small block Chevy is the short block I'm giving $450 cost to it, because I pulled off some 882 cylinder heads that were in very good shape and ready to run. Basically lap in the valves and you could run them again for quite some time. The cylinder heads were Vortex. I gave $200 for it. The cam I allotted $25 for, which is kind of crazy that the cam would, but if I saved the cam all these years sitting in a box and organized the lifters, it was probably worth $25. The intake was an eBay intake. And then I've got that miscellaneous column of rings, bearings, gaskets, silicone, paint, and cleaning supplies of $190. This motor does not have new cam bearings, but it had all rods, all mains replaced, all the bearings replaced. It had the oil pump that came in it, which was a Melling high volume. I left it alone. It had a Cloy's double roller chain on it from the previous owner. The total I believe I have invested in this 400 small block is $1,155. So none of these motors have been to the machine shop under my watch. They are just parts that I bought off of Facebook Marketplace and assembled some economical small blocks and dyno tested them. The next motor we're going to show on the dyno is the 307, which I've had great interest in a 307, what it's going to do. I do not believe they ever put a 4-barrel on a 307. If somebody knows differently, I'm sure, I'm asking you to correct me down in the comments, but I believe 307s were only 2 barrels. They were just an economical motor. The heads that I put on it are I think the right word to use is maligned. The TBI 350 Chevy heads, they have a small combustion chamber of 64 cc's, but they have a really weird swirl port above the valve seat in the bowl area. I did a basic bowl blend pocket port, but they're just, all you could do is knock off some edges and smooth some stuff up. There was not a lot you could do there. I put Z28 springs on it. The camshaft is a camshaft I've had kicking around my shop for almost 20 years. It's a hydraulic flat tappet extreme energy. The camshaft is a late 90s cam. I got it out of a good running motor way over 15 years ago, and I've had it in different motors and tested it, and it just has refused to go flat. The motor oil that I ran in all these projects was the Summit Racing 10W30 high zinc oil. That's, you know, a Summit oil is what it is. So the intake was an eBay intake, because you got to have the TBI style bolts on the inside. They go in at a different angle. I bolted down the adapters that work for a regular small block Chevy just there, so I didn't lose them. So let me show you what this little 307 did on the dyno. Like I said, I had a lot of people interested on what this motor was going to make. Let me run the footage, and I'll be back to go over and wrap this project up. Okay, the last motor here, the 307. The short block came out of a 1971 C10 that I bought that was nearly show quality, and the guy that I bought the truck from had a machine shop do a basic cleanup rebuild on the motor, so I did nothing to the short block. I just tilted the oil pan down and changed the camshaft. The cylinder heads were TBI heads. I'm charging $2,500 for the heads, but I was given the heads and didn't want to take them, but I was given the heads. The intakes, you know, your standard eBay $130, you know, intake. The stroke on a 307 is a 3 1/4 inch stroke, like a 327. The rods are 5.7s, just like most small blocks, other than the 400, just like most all small blocks. The pistons are flat top pistons with 4 valve reliefs. I believe they're about 4 cc's. The combustion chambers are 64 cc's with, I upgraded the springs to Z28 springs. The rockers are the factory rockers that came on the heads. I just long slotted the rockers with a grinder, just very slightly to accommodate the cam that's just just a little too big for factory rocker. About a 4.65 is the most you can do on a factory rocker. So the horsepower that we got, the best pull we had was 308 horsepower, and the best torque we had was 336. The compression ratio on this motor is just an 8.9. 8.9 to 1. I mean, it's not very, very high compression. The octane I ran it on was, once again, I mentioned to you, was a 89 octane pump gas. The short block, I'm only giving it $85. And if you question that, you can go on and find a lot of 305s and 307s for $100. I tried hard to sell this motor to friends and people that I knew for $85, and I just couldn't sell it any cheaper than that because the bolts, oil pan, timing chain cover was worth that much. It had a Chloe's roller timing chain on it also when I opened up this motor, but I don't know what oil pump's in it. I've never had the oil pan cleared down on the project, but okay, so I got $85 in the short block. I got $25. I'm saying $25 in the heads, the cam 125, the intake 130, the miscellaneous column, I'm giving it $120. The reason when I didn't even buy a whole gasket kit is I bought the GM Performance Parts thin head gaskets to try to get that compression as high as I could on this project. $485 total. The performance really was pretty good for such a little motor. It sounds real mean. It has good torque down low. Well, good for a 307 for the amount of cubic inches that you got. So wrapping up this project, and I appreciate you hanging with me so long. This is a super long video, but the conclusion, the hammer drop is my story about the guy that is always going to put an LS in his car and how great it's going to be. I ask him how much horsepower he thinks his project's going to make, and the response is almost always, if he's just putting a stock LS with an intake on it, 320 to 340. And I'm going to post some pictures at the end of the video. There's some popular YouTube channels from California that agrees that has ran motors like that, totally stock, 5.3 LS, makes 320 horse to 340 horse. I thought you could throw any garbage against the wall with a small block and make about that. The tiny 307 made 308, and the 400 made 375 approximately. I like small block Chevys, and I'm going to continue to be rebuilding them and putting them in old Chevys for myself and family and friends. And this is Nick. I really appreciate you hanging tight with me with this super long video. I'm going to post a few pictures, and I took my trip on out to Pittsburgh. I went through Pittsburgh and Virginia and visited some friends out there when I was on my trip. So this is Nick. I'll see you later.